A little black girl with a heart full of compassion decided to share her hot dog with a homeless white man. However, the next day, her life took an unexpected turn when the police showed up at her doorstep. What had happened? Did the homeless man have any connection to the girl? The story doesn't end there. Hidden secrets and truths will gradually unfold, prompting everyone to rethink their prejudices and the lives of those they often overlook. Before we dive in, let us know. What time are you listening to this, and where are you? Drop a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. It was a crisp autumn afternoon in the heart of the bustling city, and school had just let out. Children ran down the steps, their laughter filling the air as they scattered toward various paths home. Mia, an energetic 8-year-old with dark curly hair and a warm smile, skipped along the familiar path to her neighborhood park, clutching a hot dog wrapped in foil that her mother had packed for her. This routine, a brief stop at the park before heading home, was her favorite part of the day. The playground, with its swings and slides, felt like her own small world within the larger, busy city around her. As she entered the park, her eyes drifted toward the playground. But something caught her attention first. A man sitting alone on a nearby bench. He was hunched over, his clothes worn and his beard scruffy, his gaze fixed distantly on the ground. He looked different from the bustling crowd around, detached in a way that even her young mind sensed was unusual. Though his face was lined and tired, there was something gentle about him, something that piqued her curiosity. Mia lingered, her gaze fixed on him as she unwrapped her hot dog. She glanced down at her snack and then back at the man. Her mom always told her that a small act of kindness could make someone's day better. Before she could think twice, Mia approached the man, her small steps determined yet cautious. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice a quiet murmur. The man looked up, startled out of his thoughts. His blue eyes, though weary, held a gentleness that made Mia feel safe. "Yes," he replied, his voice rough and soft at the same time. Mia held out her hot dog, her hands slightly trembling with nervousness. "Are you hungry? You can have this if you want." The man's expression softened, a look of surprise flickering across his face. He hesitated, glancing from the hot dog to Mia's face, as if searching for something. For a moment, it seemed like he might refuse, but he reached out slowly, accepting the food with a nod of gratitude. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "That's very kind of you." Mia watched as he took a small bite, savoring it as though it was a feast. She felt a surge of warmth and pride, happy that she'd helped someone, even if it was just a little. She sat down on the bench next to him, her legs swinging above the ground. For a few moments, they sat in comfortable silence, the noise of the park fading into the background. "Do you come here often?" Mia asked, her curiosity getting the better of her. The man hesitated, as if searching for the right words. "Sometimes," he replied simply. There was a sadness in his eyes, a distance that Mia couldn't quite understand, but felt drawn to ease. "What's your name?" she asked. The man hesitated again. "People just call me Jack," he replied. Mia beamed. "I'm Mia." Jack gave her a small smile, the corners of his mouth lifting just slightly. "Nice to meet you, Mia." They sat together a little longer, sharing the silence. Mia's young heart sensed that Jack was someone with a story he kept hidden behind that quiet gaze. But before she could ask him anything more, she realized it was getting late. "I have to go now," Mia said, sliding off the bench. "Maybe I'll see you again?" Jack's eyes softened as he nodded. "Maybe," he replied. His voice held a warmth that hadn't been there before, as if her simple act of kindness had lifted a small part of the weight he carried. With a quick wave, Mia turned and headed down the path toward her apartment, her heart full from her brief encounter. She couldn't wait to tell her mom about her new friend. As she disappeared from view, Jack remained on the bench, watching the spot where she'd stood. Later that evening, Mia bounded into her apartment, her eyes bright with excitement. The cozy, modest space was filled with the smell of her mother's cooking, and Angela, her mom, stood by the stove stirring a pot of soup. She looked up as Mia entered, immediately noticing the wide smile on her daughter's face. "Mom," Mia called, rushing to the table and setting down her backpack. "You won't believe what happened today." Angela smiled, setting her spoon down and turning her attention to Mia. "Oh, what happened, sweetheart?" Mia took a deep breath, her words tumbling out in a rush. I met someone in the park. His name is Jack, and he looked really hungry, so I gave him my hot dog. He was so nice, but he seemed sad. Angela's smile softened, but a hint of worry crept into her eyes as she listened. A man in the park? Mia? Was he a stranger? Mia nodded, her excitement undimmed. Yes, but he was very kind. He didn't talk much, but he smiled when I gave him my hot dog. He said I made him happy. Angela knelt beside Mia, placing her hands gently on her daughter's shoulders. She took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. Mia, I'm really proud of you for being kind and sharing your food with someone. That's a wonderful thing to do. She paused, a thoughtful expression crossing her face. But you have to be careful around people you don't know, especially adults who might be going through difficult times. Mia's face fell slightly, her brows knitting together as she tried to understand her mother's concern. But Jack wasn't scary, Mom. He was just lonely. Like he needed a friend. Angela pulled Mia into a gentle hug, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. I understand, honey, and I'm so proud of you for wanting to help others. But sometimes people can be dealing with things we don't understand, and it can be hard to know if they are safe to be around. Mia nodded slowly, though she still seemed a bit confused. So, should I not talk to him anymore? Angela sighed, feeling the weight of a mother's worry. It's not that you can't talk to him, but if you see him again, come tell me, and we can figure out a safe way to help him. Does that sound good? Mia nodded, though she still looked thoughtful. Okay, Mom, I'll be careful. Angela smiled, feeling a mix of pride and protectiveness. That's my girl. Now, go wash up for dinner. As Mia scampered off to wash her hands, Angela stood up and returned to her cooking, but her mind lingered on Mia's story. She couldn't help but feel uneasy. Though she trusted her daughter's judgment, the thought of Mia interacting with someone she didn't know, especially someone who might be in a vulnerable situation, made her anxious. She wanted to encourage Mia's kindness, but needed to find a way to balance it with safety. Later that evening, as Angela tucked Mia into bed, Mia looked up at her, her expression filled with a mixture of innocence and determination. Mom, she whispered, her eyes earnest. I think Jack is sad because he doesn't have anyone. I want to help him be happy again. Angela's heart softened, but her concern remained. I know, sweetie, and that's a beautiful thing. Just remember that you have me too. If you want to help Jack, we'll do it together, okay? Mia nodded, her face lighting up with relief. Okay, Mom, we'll help him together. As Angela kissed her daughter's forehead and quietly left the room, she couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter with Jack might be more complicated than it seemed. She resolved to keep a close eye on Mia's new friend, hoping that her daughter's kindness would indeed bring some light into someone's life, but cautiously aware that, in the world outside their safe little home, not everything was as simple as a child's wish to help. The day after her first encounter with Jack, Mia returned to the park, her backpack bouncing as she hurried to her usual spot by the swings. She looked around, hoping to spot him sitting on the bench where they had met, but it was empty. Slightly disappointed but undeterred, she climbed onto the swing, letting the warm afternoon breeze carry her as she pumped her legs back and forth. As she swung higher, Mia's gaze kept drifting toward the park entrance, her heart racing with the hope of seeing Jack again. Just when she was about to give up, she noticed a familiar figure standing near a cluster of trees across the playground. She squinted, and a smile spread across her face as she recognized Jack's worn jacket and unkempt hair. He seemed to be keeping his distance, almost as if he were unsure about being seen. Without hesitation, Mia hopped off the swing and skipped over, her hand raised in a friendly wave. Jack noticed her approach and froze, as if deciding whether to stay or leave. But as Mia drew nearer, he seemed to relax, his shoulders easing slightly. Hi, Jack, she greeted him, her voice bright and cheerful. I'm so glad to see you again. Jack's face softened, though a cautious look remained in his eyes. Hello, Mia, he replied quietly, his voice gruff but gentle. Reaching into her backpack, Mia pulled out a small wrapped snack and held it out to him. I brought you something, she said, her eyes shining with the same kindness that had touched him the day before. It's just a cookie, but it's really good. Jack hesitated before accepting it, giving her a nod of thanks. Unwrapping the cookie slowly, he took a small bite, savoring it as though it were the first sweet treat he'd had in a long time. Mia watched him closely, studying his face. "Do you come here often?" she asked, her curiosity shining through. Jack glanced around the park, his gaze distant. "Sometimes," he murmured, "when I need a quiet place." Mia nodded thoughtfully. "I like it here too. It's my favorite place to play after school." Jack took another bite, chewing in silence as Mia continued to chat, undeterred by his quiet responses. She told him about her day at school, her favorite classes, and how her mom always made the best snacks for her lunch. Though Jack barely said a word, Mia felt he was truly listening, like her words were filling a silent space around him. As they sat in companionable silence, Mia noticed Jack's fingers drumming a gentle rhythm against his leg. It was almost absent-minded, as if he were lost in his own world. She tilted her head, intrigued. "Do you like music, Jack?" she asked, her voice filled with curiosity. For a brief moment, a flicker of something crossed Jack's face, a mix of surprise and sorrow. His hand stilled, and he lowered his gaze. "I used to," he replied, his voice tinged with an emotion Mia couldn't quite place. It sounded almost like sadness. "Oh," Mia said softly, sensing that she had touched on something private. She decided to change the subject, hoping to lighten the mood. "My mom says music is like magic. She says it can make people happy, even when they feel sad. Do you think that's true?" Jack's gaze softened, and he gave a faint nod. "Maybe," he whispered, "maybe it is." Feeling a quiet understanding between them, Mia plucked a small daisy from the grass nearby, twirling it between her fingers before looking up at him with a shy smile. "Can we be friends, Jack?" she asked, her voice hopeful. "I don't have many friends outside of school." Jack's guarded expression softened further, a glimmer of warmth breaking through his usual weariness. "If you want to be," he replied slowly, as though the concept of friendship was new to him. Mia's face lit up, her smile spreading wide as she nodded happily. She knew that her kindness had reached him, even if he couldn't express it fully. Before she left, she turned back to Jack, waving cheerfully. "I'll see you around, Jack." As Mia skipped away toward her home, Jack remained by the trees, silently watching the spot where she had just stood. A faint warmth flickered in his heart, a small but unmistakable light piercing through the shadows that had clung to him for so long. Over the next few days, Mia's mind was often occupied by thoughts of Jack. She couldn't wait to see him again, each afternoon bringing new excitement as she returned to the park, hoping he would be there. And, almost as if he had felt her wish, Jack began to show up more frequently. Each time, Mia brought something with her, a small snack, a drawing she'd made, or a story to share. One sunny afternoon, Mia greeted Jack with a picture she had drawn just for him. It was a simple drawing of a sun and flowers with the words, "Friends make the world brighter," written in her best handwriting. She held it out to him proudly, her face beaming with excitement. Jack looked at the drawing, his surprise evident. He took it gingerly, as if afraid it might vanish in his hands. "Thank you, Mia," he said softly, carefully folding the picture and slipping it into his coat pocket. "It's very bright." Encouraged by his reaction, Mia sat beside him on the grass, chatting animatedly about her day at school and the spelling quiz she'd been practicing for. Jack listened, nodding occasionally, and though he didn't say much, Mia could sense he appreciated her company. "What about you, Jack?" she asked eventually, tilting her head with curiosity. "Do you ever have a favorite part of the day?" Jack hesitated, as if he hadn't considered such a question in years. "I don't know," he replied slowly. "Maybe when it's quiet." He paused, glancing at her, a faint smile flickering in his eyes. "But I think I like listening to you talk too." Mia's face brightened, her grin widening. She noticed his fingers once again moving in that gentle rhythm, and her curiosity got the best of her. "Jack, do you play music?" Jack's hands stilled, and his face darkened slightly. "I used to," he murmured, his gaze drifting into the distance. For a moment, it seemed as though he'd been transported somewhere far away. "Why did you stop?" Mia asked, her voice soft and gentle, sensing she had touched on something sensitive. Jack took a deep breath, his tone low. "Sometimes life changes," he said, his voice tinged with a sorrow Mia could feel, even if she didn't fully understand it. She sensed that he wasn't ready to share more, so she didn't press him. Instead, she reached into her backpack and pulled out a granola bar, offering it to him. He accepted it quietly, taking small, thoughtful bites as they sat in silence. Over the next week, these quiet moments became a comforting routine, their connection deepening with each passing day. Jack began asking Mia questions, wanting to know about her favorite games, her dreams, and the things that made her happy. Meanwhile, Angela noticed Mia's growing attachment to Jack. While she admired her daughter's kindness, she couldn't help but feel a twinge of concern. She knew little about this man, and while he seemed harmless, she felt a responsibility to protect Mia. One evening, as they were clearing the dinner table, Angela decided to talk to her. "Mia," she began gently, "I've noticed you've been spending a lot of time with that man at the park." Mia looked up, her face open and innocent. "Jack?" she replied, smiling. "He's my friend, Mom. I like talking to him." Angela hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Sweetheart, I'm glad you're kind to people, and it's wonderful that you want to help. But sometimes we need to be cautious around strangers, even if they seem nice. Do you understand that?" Mia nodded, though she seemed a bit puzzled. "But Jack's not dangerous, Mom. He's just sad. I think he needs a friend." Angela sighed, feeling torn. She didn't want to discourage Mia's compassion, but she knew the world wasn't always as safe as her daughter believed. "I know, sweetheart," she said, brushing a strand of hair from Mia's face. "But let's just be careful, okay? And if you ever feel uncomfortable, promise me you'll tell me." "I promise, Mom," Mia replied, her voice sincere. Angela hugged her daughter, feeling a mixture of pride and worry. She couldn't help but wonder about Jack, about who he was and what had led him to this place. But she trusted Mia's instincts. Her daughter had always been perceptive and kind-hearted. That night, as Mia lay in bed, her thoughts returned to Jack. She wished there were more she could do to make him happy. As she drifted off to sleep, she whispered a silent hope that she'd see him again tomorrow, eager for another chance to bring a little light into his world, if only for a moment. The days grew shorter as fall deepened, casting a cozy warmth over the neighborhood. The park was quieter now, with fewer children playing and more people bustling about on errands. Mia continued to visit Jack after school, bringing him little treats or handmade crafts. Their bond was growing, but not everyone saw Jack in the same light as Mia did. One afternoon, as Mia ran out the door with her backpack slung over one shoulder, Angela looked on from the kitchen window. She admired her daughter's compassion, but felt an uneasiness creeping in, especially with the way the neighbors had started whispering. At the local grocery store, Angela had felt eyes following her. Mrs. Harrison, the neighborhood's self-appointed watchful eye, seemed particularly invested in Mia's outings to the park. When Angela paused near the produce section, Mrs. Harrison sidled up next to her, holding a basket filled with vegetables and wearing a look of mild disapproval. "Angela, I couldn't help but notice Mia spending a lot of time at the park lately," she said, her tone polite but tinged with judgment. "I hope she's being safe." Angela forced a polite smile. "Of course, Mrs. Harrison. Mia just loves the outdoors, and she's always nearby." Mrs. Harrison pursed her lips. "Yes, well, I heard she's been talking to that man, the one who's always on that park bench." She leaned in, lowering her voice. "You know, Angela, it might be best to keep Mia close to home. You can't be too careful these days." Angela felt a mix of frustration and defensiveness. She knew Jack was rough around the edges, but he hadn't done anything to harm Mia. She was proud of her daughter's kindness and saw the positive influence it was having on Jack. But hearing Mrs. Harrison's words left her with an uncomfortable feeling that lingered long after she left the store. That evening, as Angela prepared dinner, her mind returned to Mrs. Harrison's words. She knew Mia had a good heart, but the world wasn't always as kind as her daughter was. She began to question whether she was being too lenient in allowing Mia to form a friendship with Jack. "Mia, honey, come set the table," she called, watching as her daughter bounded into the kitchen. Mia grabbed the plates eagerly, placing them on the table. "Mom, guess what? Jack said he used to have a family. He didn't say much, but I think he misses them. I feel sad for him." Angela's hands paused mid-motion as she listened to Mia. She felt torn between pride for her daughter's empathy and a protective instinct urging her to shield Mia from the realities of the world. "Sweetheart, I'm glad you want to help people," Angela began cautiously, "but you know not everyone in this world has good intentions. Sometimes people carry pain that can make them unpredictable." Mia's face fell slightly, but she nodded, sensing her mother's concern. "But Mom, Jack is nice. He's just sad. I think he needs a friend." Angela sighed, ruffling Mia's hair. "I know, baby. Just promise me you'll be careful and always tell me if something makes you uncomfortable." Mia nodded enthusiastically, her youthful confidence unwavering. "I promise, Mom." The next day, as Mia skipped out the door to meet Jack, Angela watched from the window, her mind filled with conflicting emotions. She wondered if she should follow her daughter, maybe even talk to Jack herself. But something held her back. Perhaps it was a mixture of curiosity and respect for Mia's growing independence. Later that week, Angela found herself at a neighborhood meeting where the discussion took an unexpected turn. One of the mothers in the group brought up the issue of a stranger in the park. "It just doesn't feel safe to have someone like that around, especially near our children," one of them remarked, glancing meaningfully at Angela. Angela felt a wave of defensiveness. She wanted to defend Jack, to explain that he wasn't a threat, but she also felt the weight of the other mother's concerns. After all, they didn't know Jack the way Mia did, but was she right to assume he was harmless just because her daughter saw something good in him? Back at home, Mia continued her regular visits, undeterred by the growing tension in the neighborhood. She shared stories with her mom about Jack's small smiles, the quiet moments they spent feeding birds together, and the stories he sometimes hinted at, but never fully told. Angela began to see a change in Mia, a newfound sense of compassion and empathy that went beyond her years. But as proud as she was, she couldn't ignore the whispers, the questions that lingered in her mind. One evening, Angela noticed Mia's backpack lying open on the living room floor, a drawing sticking out from its pocket. She pulled it out to find a crayon picture of a man with a sad face, sitting on a park bench, a little girl standing next to him, offering him a flower. The drawing was simple, yet powerful. Angela felt her heart ache as she looked at it. Her daughter had seen something beautiful in Jack's brokenness, a quiet humanity that others overlooked. And Angela realized that maybe, just maybe, she could trust Mia's intuition. As the days passed, Angela continued to let Mia see Jack, though she remained vigilant, watching closely from a distance. She found herself wondering about Jack's story and what had led him to the life he now lived. Despite the neighborhood gossip, Angela's resolve grew stronger. She knew that as long as Jack brought no harm, Mia's kindness was something worth preserving. The air had grown crisp as autumn deepened, blanketing the neighborhood in vibrant shades of red, orange, and yellow. Leaves scattered across the park where Mia and Jack met, rustling underfoot as Mia skipped over to her usual spot on the bench beside him. Today she had come with a small pumpkin muffin she'd baked with her mom the night before, intending to share it with Jack. Jack took the muffin, his hands wrapped around it as if savoring its warmth. For a moment, he seemed to relax, his usual distant stare softening. "Thanks, Mia. I don't think I've had one of these well, I can't even remember," he said with a faint smile, taking a small bite. Mia beamed, delighted that he liked it. After a quiet moment, her curiosity got the better of her. "Jack, do you like music?" The question seemed simple enough to Mia, who was always curious to know more about her friend. But for Jack, it was like a sharp wind piercing through him. His face darkened, and his hands shook slightly, the muffin slipping from his grasp and falling onto the ground. He didn't seem to notice, his eyes staring ahead as if seeing something only he could perceive. "Music," he muttered, his voice a low rasp. "It was everything to me. Until—" He trailed off, a look of anguish clouding his face. Mia felt a pang of sadness, sensing she had stirred something painful within him. "I'm sorry, Jack. I didn't mean to make you sad." Jack shook his head, snapping out of his trance. His gaze softened as he looked down at Mia, her innocent face full of concern. "It's not your fault, Mia. Sometimes memories, they're like ghosts. They never really leave you." He stood up abruptly, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "I think I need some time," he said quietly, taking a few steps back. Without another word, he turned and walked away, his figure blending into the distance. Mia watched him go, a mixture of confusion and sadness in her heart. She hadn't meant to hurt him. She only wanted to understand her friend better. She stayed seated on the bench, staring at the spot where he had just been, wondering what secrets Jack held and why they seemed so difficult for him to bear. That evening, at home, Mia couldn't stop thinking about Jack's reaction. She replayed the scene in her mind, trying to understand what had caused him so much pain. When Angela noticed her daughter's pensive mood at dinner, she reached out gently. "Is everything all right, sweetheart?" Angela asked, her voice full of concern. Mia nodded slowly, but then looked up at her mother, her eyes full of questions. "Mom, why do you think people get sad when they remember things they used to love?" Angela thought carefully before answering, aware that Mia was trying to piece together something important. "Sometimes, things happen that change the way we see the world, honey. Even things we once loved can bring us sadness, if they're tied to painful memories." Mia nodded, though she didn't fully understand. All she knew was that she didn't want Jack to be sad. She resolved to keep being his friend, hoping that maybe her kindness could make a difference. In the following days, Mia returned to the park, hoping to see Jack, but he was nowhere to be found. Each afternoon she would sit on the bench for a while, waiting and looking around, her heart sinking a bit more each time she left without seeing him. Angela noticed Mia's disappointment and felt her own worry grow. Jack had seemed vulnerable, and she feared that Mia's kind heart was leading her toward heartache. Yet, Angela couldn't deny the impact this friendship had on her daughter. Mia had learned compassion, patience, and understanding in ways she couldn't have imagined. Even though Angela had her reservations, she continued to support Mia's efforts, hoping for Jack's return. One evening, as Mia and Angela were about to head home from the park, they saw a figure in the distance. It was Jack. His coat pulled tightly around him, his expression weary but softer than Mia had ever seen. "Mia," he called, his voice low but carrying across the space between them. He approached the bench where Mia stood, a small, hesitant smile on his face. Mia's face lit up. She ran to him, her eyes shining with relief and happiness. "Jack! I missed you. I didn't think you'd come back." Jack looked at her, his gaze warm but tinged with a sadness that had become part of him. "I needed to think, Mia. I haven't told anyone about my life in a long time. I don't know why, but it feels easier when I'm around you." Mia smiled, taking his hand. "You don't have to tell me everything, Jack. Just know I'm here for you." Jack nodded, seeming lighter than before. He took a deep breath, looking up at the sky as the evening stars began to appear, their light faint but steady. They sat together, watching as the sky darkened, and Jack seemed to draw comfort from the silence, the simple presence of someone who cared. It was a quiet Saturday morning when Angela heard a knock on the door. She opened it to find 2 police officers standing there, their expressions calm but serious. Mia was at the table, finishing her breakfast, and looked up with wide, curious eyes. Angela's heart skipped a beat. "Officers, is something wrong?" The taller officer, introducing himself as Officer Bennett, gave her a reassuring smile. "We just have a few questions, Mrs. Thompson. We're hoping you can help us with some information about a man we believe your daughter may have met in the park." Angela's mind immediately went to Jack. Her face paled, but she kept her voice steady. "Yes, there's a man my daughter's befriended, a homeless man. Is he in trouble?" Officer Bennett glanced at his partner, then back at Angela. "We believe he might be a man named Jack Miller. Before his life took a turn, Jack was a renowned violinist in the city. His story is tragic. He lost his wife and 2 daughters. That accident left him devastated. He walked away from music and, well, from everything." Angela's eyes widened as the pieces fell into place. She had noticed Jack's reserved demeanor, his sorrowful gaze, but she hadn't realized the extent of his pain. The other officer, Officer Raines, continued. "We don't mean to alarm you or Mia. We're only here to gather information. We're hoping that if Jack has connected with your daughter, it might give him a reason to rebuild his life. Sometimes, people find hope in unexpected places." Angela glanced back at Mia, who was listening intently, her young face marked with both sadness and understanding. She felt a pang in her chest. Her daughter's compassion had led her to a man burdened with unimaginable grief. Does he know you're looking for him?" Angela asked, her voice soft. "We haven't approached him yet," Officer Bennett explained. "We didn't want to disrupt whatever trust he's built with Mia. We're trying to be careful. If you feel comfortable, perhaps you could help us by encouraging him to connect with his past. If he wants to reach out, we can help him get the resources he needs." Angela nodded slowly, processing everything. She looked back at Mia, who was watching her with wide eyes, as if waiting for permission to ask the 1,000 questions she clearly had. "Thank you, officers. I appreciate your discretion," Angela said, ushering them out after exchanging contact information. She closed the door and turned to Mia, kneeling to meet her daughter's gaze. "Mia," Angela began gently, "do you understand what the officers said?" Mia nodded slowly, her eyes filled with a mixture of wonder and sadness. "Jack lost his family. Just like that?" Angela wrapped her arms around Mia, pulling her close. "Yes, sweetheart. It was very hard for him. Sometimes, when people go through something so painful, they feel like they can't go on. That's why he's been so quiet and sad." Mia's face was serious, her young mind processing the tragedy with surprising maturity. "But Mom, maybe if I keep being his friend, he'll feel better. I want to help him be happy again." Angela held her daughter a little tighter. "I know you do, Mia. And sometimes, kindness is the best thing we can offer someone." For the rest of the day, Mia seemed lost in thought, her mind turning over the officer's words, the story of Jack's past, and her determination to be there for him. Angela watched her daughter closely, feeling both proud and protective, hoping that Mia's kindness wouldn't be met with disappointment. That evening, as they prepared dinner, Mia quietly voiced her plan. "Mom, can we bring Jack something special tomorrow? Maybe something that reminds him of happy times?" Angela considered the idea, nodding slowly. "That's a wonderful thought, Mia. We can find something meaningful to give him. Maybe just showing him we care will make a difference." The next morning, Mia and Angela went to the park carrying a small package, an old violin pin Angela had found at a thrift store. It was simple but elegant, a token of encouragement, something to remind Jack that even the past, with all its pain, had been filled with moments worth cherishing. When Jack appeared, looking worn but managing a small smile at the sight of Mia, she handed him the pin, her eyes wide with hopeful anticipation. "It's for you, Jack," Mia said softly. "It's so, you're not alone." Jack stared at the pin, his face a mixture of shock and gratitude. He looked down at Mia, his eyes misty, and nodded, his voice barely a whisper. "Thank you, Mia. This means more than you know." They sat together in silence, the weight of unspoken words lingering between them, and in that moment, something in Jack's heart began to shift, softened by the kindness of a little girl who only wanted to bring light back into his life. Mia woke early the next morning, her thoughts centered around Jack. She was determined to see him again and hoped he would open up to her. After a quick breakfast, she asked Angela if they could go to the park. Angela sensed her daughter's resolve and agreed, knowing this meeting was important to Mia. As they approached the park, Mia spotted Jack sitting on the same bench where they had first met. He seemed deep in thought, staring at the small violin pin she had given him the day before. His face softened when he noticed her approaching, and for the first time, he looked at her with a trace of a smile. "Hi, Jack," Mia said, her voice filled with gentle warmth. "Can I sit with you?" Jack nodded, gesturing to the empty spot beside him. They sat together in silence for a moment, the noise of the park bustling around them. Mia took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the questions she'd been holding in. "Jack," she began carefully, "I know it's hard to talk about sad things, but sometimes it helps to remember the good parts, too." Jack looked down, his expression a mix of hesitation and longing. He held the pin tightly in his hand, his knuckles white as if he were gathering strength from it. Slowly he began to speak, his voice barely above a whisper. "I used to play music," he said, glancing at Mia. "The violin, it was my life. I loved it more than anything. My family, they supported me every step of the way. They were supposed to come to one of my performances, but..." He trailed off, struggling to find the words. Mia placed her small hand on his, her eyes filled with compassion. You don't have to say everything, Jack. Just tell me what you want. Jack took a shaky breath. My wife and daughters were on their way to see me perform. They never made it. It was a car accident. And just like that, they were gone. I couldn't bear to pick up the violin after that. Every note, every melody reminded me of them, of what I had lost. He fell silent, staring off into the distance, as if lost in a painful memory. Mia squeezed his hand, her heart aching for him. She couldn't fully understand his loss, but she could feel the depth of his sorrow. You know, Jack, Mia said softly, maybe your family would still want you to play. Maybe they'd want you to find happiness again. You could play for them, for their memory. Jack looked at her, the hint of a tear glistening in his eye. It's hard to think that way, Mia. I've been so angry, so lost. I thought if I just disappeared, maybe the pain would too. But you keep showing up, bringing kindness where I thought there'd be none left. Mia gave him a small, hopeful smile. My mom says that sometimes kindness finds you even when you're not looking for it. And maybe you don't have to disappear, Jack. Maybe you can find a new way to honor your family, even if it's just a little bit at a time. Jack's gaze softened as he listened to her words. For the first time in years, he felt a faint spark of hope, something he hadn't allowed himself to feel since the accident. He hadn't considered the possibility that his music could become a tribute rather than a reminder of his grief. As they sat together, the world around them seemed to fade away. Jack felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. Mia's simple kindness had cracked open a door he had long kept locked, and he found himself wanting to walk through it, if only to see what lay on the other side. Thank you, Mia, he said quietly. Thank you for not giving up on me. With that, they sat together in silence, each of them feeling the quiet power of forgiveness and hope, a reminder that even in the darkest times, light could find a way in. The next morning, Jack found himself standing outside a small music shop, the familiar scent of polished wood and resin lingering in the air. It had been years since he'd even thought about stepping into a place like this, but something Mia had said the day before echoed in his mind. Maybe you could find a way to honor your family. Tentatively, he stepped inside. The owner, an older man with a kind face, greeted him with a nod. Jack scanned the room, eyes settling on a violin hanging on the far wall. It reminded him of his own, a treasured instrument that he'd sold long ago, believing he'd never have a reason to play again. Looking for something special? The shop owner asked, noticing Jack's focused gaze. Jack hesitated. Just looking? He moved closer to the violin, feeling his heartbeat quicken. It was as if the instrument itself was calling to him, asking him to remember the joy it had once brought him, and the love it represented. The emotions felt overwhelming, but Jack took a deep breath, steadying himself. He thought of Mia and the kindness she'd shown him, the hope she seemed to have for his future. Maybe he could take a small step forward. Could I try it? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The shop owner nodded, lifting the violin from its display and placing it in Jack's hands. It felt strange yet familiar, as though it had been waiting for him all this time. Jack lifted the bow, drawing it slowly across the strings, producing a soft, trembling note. As the sound filled the room, memories flooded back. Concerts, rehearsals, his family's proud faces watching from the audience. The pain was still there, but alongside it, he felt a sense of warmth and love. He played a simple melody, one he'd composed years ago, before everything had changed. The music felt like an old friend, and for the first time since the accident, Jack didn't push it away. He embraced it, letting each note carry the weight of his sorrow and the hope he was beginning to feel. When he finished, the shop owner looked at him with a gentle smile. You've still got it. That was beautiful. Jack set the violin down, his hands trembling. Thank you, he replied quietly. He hadn't realized how much he missed this. How much he missed the way music made him feel connected to something greater than himself. Leaving the shop, Jack walked with a newfound sense of purpose. He wanted to try playing again, not for fame or recognition, but as a way to heal and to honor the memory of his family. He could almost hear his daughter's laughter and his wife's gentle encouragement, as though they were watching over him, urging him forward. Over the next few days, Jack started spending more time at the park, bringing an old violin he managed to borrow from a community center. The music began to flow again, hesitantly at first, but with growing confidence. As he played, people passing by would stop to listen, some even closing their eyes, lost in the melody. Jack didn't mind the attention. In fact, he found a sense of comfort in sharing his music once more. Mia and Angela often joined him, bringing their warmth and support. Mia's eyes would shine as she listened, encouraging him with her unwavering belief in his talent. Her presence reminded Jack of the simple power of kindness, of how one small act could lead to profound change. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the park, Jack turned to Mia and Angela. "I want to give back," he said, his voice filled with quiet determination. "To use my music to help others, like you both helped me." Angela smiled, understanding the significance of Jack's words. "There are plenty of children in the neighborhood who would love to learn. Maybe you could teach them." Jack thought about it, a vision beginning to form in his mind. "I'd like that," he replied, a sense of purpose taking root within him. "Maybe I can open a small class, something close by, so I can share what I love and give others a chance to experience it too." With Mia's encouragement and Angela's support, Jack began planning. He realized he could transform his music from a painful reminder into a tribute to his family's memory, a way to keep their love alive in the lives he touched. In that moment, Jack knew he was ready to move forward. His music had become more than a source of sorrow. It was now a path to redemption, one that he was eager to walk, hand in hand with the people who had helped him find his way back. The following week, Jack walked through the neighborhood with a purpose, his mind racing with thoughts of the violin class he was planning. He could already envision the space, perhaps a small room with just enough light filtering through the windows, a few chairs arranged in a semicircle, and young faces eager to learn. Angela and Mia had been instrumental in helping him refine his idea. They spent evenings brainstorming, sitting around the kitchen table with notepads and cups of tea. Mia had eagerly suggested decorating the room with colorful music notes and inspiring quotes, while Angela had helped him think through the logistics, where they might hold the classes, how to reach out to families in the community, and whether Jack would offer the lessons for free or ask for a small fee to support supplies. Jack felt overwhelmed, but determined. He hadn't felt this alive, this eager, in years. It wasn't just about the music. It was about creating a space where he could share the love of his art and hopefully inspire others to find joy in it too. One evening, Angela made a few calls to local community centers. She knew of a modest hall near their neighborhood where groups often gathered for meetings and classes. The woman who managed the center, Mrs. Fields, was known for her kindness and for supporting community projects, especially those benefiting kids. Angela and Jack visited the hall the next day, taking in the space. It was simple, with plain white walls and folding chairs, but the room had a warmth that Jack immediately liked. Mrs. Fields listened to their plan and nodded enthusiastically. "This is a beautiful idea," she said. "We have several families in the area who would love to be involved. I think a class like this will bring a lot of joy to our community. You can use this room free of charge for the first few months." Jack felt a swell of gratitude. "Thank you, Mrs. Fields. This means a lot. I'm hoping to help these kids find something special in music, just like I did." They agreed to start the classes the following month, allowing Jack enough time to gather some supplies and let the neighborhood know about the new opportunity. Mia, thrilled about the project, immediately set to work helping Jack make posters. She hand-drew each flyer, carefully writing out the details. Free violin classes, all ages welcome, beginners encouraged. She added illustrations of tiny violins and music notes around the border. When they were ready, she and Jack posted them around the neighborhood, at the local coffee shop, the grocery store, and even outside the community center. As the weeks passed, children and parents began to sign up. Some kids had never touched a violin, but their parents liked the idea of their children trying something new. Others had longed to learn, but hadn't had the opportunity. The small class filled quickly, with a mix of boys and girls ranging from Mia's age to early teens. On the first day of class, Jack stood in the front of the room, facing a semicircle of curious faces. He felt a familiar nervousness, one he used to feel before a concert, but this time It wasn't about performing. It was about connecting, about teaching something that had once brought him immense joy. "Welcome, everyone," he began, his voice steady but warm. "Today we're going to start something special together. Some of you may have heard a violin before, some of you may have even tried to play, but in this room, we're all going to start as beginners. We'll make mistakes, we'll try again, and I hope we'll all fall in love with music." The students sat, eyes wide, some fidgeting with excitement. Jack demonstrated how to hold the violin, showing them each piece of the instrument and explaining how it worked. Mia watched him from the front row, her face beaming with pride. She loved seeing Jack in his element, sharing his passion and encouraging her friends. As the weeks went by, the class became a cherished part of the students' routine. Jack taught them simple melodies, guiding them patiently through each note. He emphasized the importance of practice, but he also encouraged them to find the joy in the process. For him, this wasn't about perfection. It was about giving his students a space to express themselves, to feel the power of music. Mia was one of his most enthusiastic students. She practiced every day, eager to master the basics so she could play along with Jack. She often stayed late after class, asking questions about the violin and trying to learn little tricks Jack had picked up over the years. Their shared passion deepened their bond, creating a friendship that neither of them had expected, but both had come to treasure. As word spread about the violin class, more families reached out to ask about future lessons. Jack realized that his small endeavor had sparked something in the community, a desire to learn, to connect, to be a part of something positive. One day, as the class ended and the students packed up their violins, Jack gathered Mia and Angela. "I was thinking," he began, looking at both of them, "that maybe we could take this a step further. How would you feel about organizing a little concert, something simple, just us here in the community center? We could raise funds for local charities and show everyone what these kids have learned." Angela's face lit up. "Jack, that's a wonderful idea. I'm sure the families would love it, and it could be a meaningful way for the kids to share their hard work." Mia's eyes sparkled with excitement. "A concert! That would be amazing, Jack. I can't wait to tell everyone." With that, the idea of their first charity concert took root, and Jack began to prepare his students for their debut. The concert would be more than just a performance. It would be a testament to Jack's journey, his return to music, and the community that had welcomed him back. For the first time in a long while, Jack felt a sense of peace. He knew his family would have been proud of him, not for the music itself, but for using it to bring people together, to inspire kindness, and to rebuild the bonds that had once broken. The community center was buzzing with excitement. Jack's students gathered in clusters, their faces a mix of anticipation and nervousness as they prepared for their first concert. Parents, siblings, and neighbors filled the seats, creating a warm and lively atmosphere. Posters Mia had drawn were taped to the walls, each one advertising the community charity concert, with proceeds going to support local families in need. Jack stood near the front, taking it all in. He could hardly believe how far things had come in just a few months. Seeing the community gathered together, the smiles on the students' faces, and the look of pride in Angela's eyes as she helped guide families to their seats made him feel a renewed sense of purpose. For the first time since his family's tragic accident, Jack felt grounded and fulfilled. Mia approached Jack, her violin case clutched tightly in her hands. She looked up at him with wide eyes, her excitement barely contained. "Jack, everyone's here. Are you ready?" she asked, her voice bubbling with enthusiasm. He smiled down at her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I think I am, Mia. And you? Are you ready to show everyone what you've learned?" Mia nodded, her face beaming with pride. "I practiced every day. I want to make you and my mom proud." Jack gave her shoulder a gentle squeeze. "You already have." As the concert began, Jack stepped up to the front to welcome the audience. He spoke from the heart, sharing the story of how a chance encounter with a kind young girl had inspired him to reconnect with music and his community. He thanked everyone for their support, especially Angela and Mia, whose compassion had given him the courage to start again. Then, it was time for the music. One by one, each student took their turn, playing simple melodies they had practiced over the weeks. Jack had chosen songs that emphasized rhythm and expression over complexity, allowing each child to play with confidence and joy. The audience clapped enthusiastically after every piece, encouraging the young musicians and filling the room with warmth. Mia's turn came last. She walked to the front, her violin tucked under her arm, and gave a quick, shy wave to the audience before positioning herself. Jack stood beside her, ready to accompany her on a duet they had practiced together. Mia took a deep breath, focused on Jack, and nodded for him to begin. As the first notes filled the room, a hush fell over the audience. Mia's playing was filled with emotion, her eyes trained on Jack as they moved in harmony. Jack felt a swell of pride. Mia had a natural talent, and he could see her passion growing with each note. The duet was simple but beautiful, a tune that resonated with everyone in the room. As they finished, the audience erupted in applause, some of them standing to show their admiration. Mia's face flushed with happiness as she looked around at the crowd, her joy lighting up the entire room. After the performance, the audience mingled, congratulating the students and offering words of praise. Jack received numerous handshakes and pats on the back, each one a reminder of how far he had come. He felt overwhelmed by gratitude and pride. Angela found him amidst the crowd, a warm smile on her face. "Jack, that was incredible. I could see how much this means to you and to everyone here. You're really making a difference." Jack nodded, his voice thick with emotion. "I never thought I'd be here, Angela. I owe so much to you and Mia. You've helped me find purpose again." Angela's eyes softened. "You're the one who did the work, Jack. You opened your heart and took that step. We're all so proud of you." Later that evening, as the crowd thinned and families began to leave, Jack, Angela, and Mia sat together in the now quiet hall, savoring the memories of the evening. Mia's face was glowing, and she couldn't stop talking about her performance. "Jack, can we do this again? Another concert? Maybe even make it a regular thing?" she asked, her excitement evident. Jack chuckled, feeling a wave of happiness he hadn't experienced in years. "I think that's a wonderful idea, Mia. We could make it a tradition, something that brings people together and helps those in need." Angela nodded in agreement. "The community clearly loves it, and it's such a powerful way to give back. Count me in for helping organize the next one." And with that, their vision began to take shape. Jack's violin class, once a small gathering of eager learners, had blossomed into something larger, something that brought hope, joy, and compassion to the entire neighborhood. Jack realized that his music, which he had once associated with sorrow, had transformed into a symbol of healing and unity. For Jack, Angela, and Mia, the music was no longer just a melody. It was a testament to the power of connection, kindness, and the beauty of new beginnings. Thank you for joining me for this story. I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing to the channel to stay updated on the heartfelt stories I'm passionate about sharing. Your support means the world to me and motivates me to keep creating. I'm truly grateful to have you on this journey with me.